to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to cover the news dated 12th September 2018 and the same has been presented on the screen. Please find the timestamps for the same provided in the description box below. Now let us begin with our today's discussion. This news appears on page 5 in the in brief section and it reads, all set for Tirupati Brahmotsavam. Now, this news can be a part of history and culture in the context of prelims, and it also forms a part under Indian heritage and culture in GS paper 1 in the context of mains. Now let us understand why this news is important with the help of previous year questions. In 2018 prelims, a question has been asked regarding state-specific festivals and we need to identify that which festival was associated with which state. Similarly, in 2017 prelims, another question was asked regarding regional festivals and associated communities. So it is in this context that Tirupati Brahmotsavam festival will also be important from prelims point of view. Now let us understand the current context with respect to this news. This festival is known as Salakatla Brahmotsavam, which is an annual festival, and a new development this year would be that several North Indian states will also be participating in this event along with the 5 southern states. Now, since many questions regarding state-specific festivals have been asked, let us decide what will be important in the context of this news. Now, firstly, we'll identify that when this festival is celebrated. Secondly, we'll talk about the area where it is celebrated. Thirdly, we'll identify the deity who is worshipped in this festival. And lastly, we'll identify the reasons because of which this festival is celebrated. So let's move on. So Salakatla Brahmotsavam is celebrated every year, that is annually, during the Ashvina month of Hindu calendar, which corresponds to September and October. Apart from this, this festival is celebrated annually at the Sri Venkateshwara temple located at Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh. Now the name of the festival itself suggests that it is celebrated to honor Lord Brahma. And the main reason for celebrating this festival is to pray for providing a life which is filled with high values and morals. Therefore, the key points to remember in this news with respect to prelims is that the Ashvin month, which corresponds to September and October, as earlier a question on Chaitra month has also been asked. Apart from this, we should also remember the state in which this festival is celebrated and the deity with which this festival is associated. So this ends the description of this news. Let's move on to the next one. The next news appears on page 7 and it reads that India's first missile tracking ship is ready for sea trials. Now this news forms a part under the general science section in the context of prelims, and it also forms a part under security in GS paper 3 with respect to mains. Now let us first understand the current developments with respect to this missile tracking ship. Hindustan Shipyard Limited is building India's first missile tracking ship which will be ready for sea trials by early October. Why we are considering this news is because in prelims 2016, a question has been asked with respect to INS Astradharini, which was a torpedo launch and recovery vessel, and it is in this context that technological developments in association to the Navy, Army or Air Force will be considered important from UPSC perspective. Now coming back to our news, this first missile tracking ship will strengthen India's strategic weapons program, and also it will help India to get entry in the elite club of a few countries that have such sophisticated ocean surveillance ship. Hence, due to the strategic importance of this missile tracking ship, we should remember it thoroughly from prelims perspective. Now moving on to the questions we need to ask ourselves while analyzing this news includes: what are the main points or features associated with this missile tracking ship? Secondly, we'll understand something about the Hindustan Shipyard Limited, that is the company which is building this missile tracking ship. And lastly, we'll talk about Visakhapatnam as a strategic location, because this is the place where this missile tracking ship is being developed. So let's move forward. Now the main points with respect to this ship includes: number 1, the ship has a capacity to carry 300 strong crew members along with high-tech gadgets and communication equipments. Apart from this, the ship is powered by 2 diesel engines and a large deck capable of helicopter landing. Another main point we should be aware of is that this ship is being built for National Technical Research Organization, which is a technical intelligence agency, and it works directly under the supervision of PMO and National Security Advisor. Now let us understand something about the Hindustan Shipyard Limited, which is responsible for making India's first missile tracking ship. Now HSL is strategically located on the east coast of Indian Peninsula at Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh. Now let us discuss the areas in which this company caters. So it is a premier shipbuilding organization which works upon shipbuilding, repairs, submarine construction and refits. It also deals with the designing and construction of offshore and onshore structures. Now the reason for focusing on the domains and importance of Hindustan Shipyard Limited was because currently it is dealing with many other important projects related to defense, and hence we must know something about it. Now let us understand why Visakhapatnam is considered to be a strategic location on the east coast for defense related activities. Now firstly, we must know that Visakhapatnam is the headquarter of Eastern Naval Command. It is considered to be strategic as many important projects, for example, nuclear-powered INS Arihant class submarines are being built here. We must also know that Rambili, which is a naval alternate operational base, is considered to be the second naval base after Visakhapatnam, and it is a training center for marine commandos and also serves as the headquarters of the submarine arm. Therefore, it is in the context of this development with respect to defense that Visakhapatnam is considered to be a strategic location. Rambili is another strategic location in the same area which is considered to be the second naval base after Visakhapatnam. So finally, with respect to this news, we need to remember some important points in the context of prelims. This includes number 1, which is very obvious that India is launching its first missile tracking ship. Secondly, we need to remember the features incorporated in this missile tracking ship. Thirdly, we should know the body for which this ship is being built. Here it is National Technical Research Organization. Also, we need to know about the company which is building this ship, which is Hindustan Shipyard Limited. Lastly, we need to remember the importance of Visakhapatnam as a strategic defense location. Now with this, the discussion on this news is completed. Let's move on to the next one. News appears on page 1 and it is also continued on page 10, and it reads that small loans could turn bad. Now this news is covered under economic and social development in the context of prelims, and it forms a part under GS paper 3 in the context of mains. Now let us first understand the current context of this news, after which we'll correlate this news with previously asked questions in UPSC. Now this article is an extract from a note prepared by Mr. Raghuram Rajan, who is our ex-RBI governor, and it deals with the NPA problems in India along with some useful suggestions to prevent such recurrences. Now in 2017 prelims, a question concerning scheme for sustainable structuring of stressed assets has been asked, wherein it was a scheme of RBI for reworking the financial structure of big corporate entities facing genuine difficulties. And it is in this context that NPAs too form an important part in the economy of India, and thus it will be helpful to study them from UPSC perspective. So now in the following discussion, we are going to talk about 4 things. Number one, reasons leading to NPAs. Secondly, what role RBI could have played in order to prevent this situation. And lastly, we'll discuss the suggestions given by Mr. Rajan to prevent further damage. Let's begin by understanding the extent of NPAs currently prevailing in India. Now, the gross NPAs of the banks rose to 10.3 lakh crores in 2018, and this 10.3 lakhs amounts to 11.2% of the total loans. Now, looking at these figures, we can understand that the situation of India with respect to NPAs is currently very bad. So in this context, let us try and understand the reasons behind the occurrence of NPAs. Now, the origins of bad loans can be attributed to the time period between 2006 to 2008, because at this point of time, economic growth was very strong in India, and it was because of this economic growth that banks became over-optimistic and therefore did not follow diligence in extending fresh loans. However, in 2008, a financial crisis hit India, because of which growth became slow, and the companies who were expecting profits in turn became unable to pay back the loans on time. Also, earlier prevailing schemes with respect to non-performing assets were not as efficient, and it took a lot of time for insolvency and bankruptcy code to be applied for faster resolution of NPAs. Another problem with respect to NPAs considered in this note was red tapeism, wherein delays in government approvals led to increase in the number of stalled projects. And lastly, the occurrence of NPAs can be attributed to a large number of frauds which the system has been ineffective in curbing. And it is in this context that RBI has set up a fraud monitoring cell to coordinate with the early reporting of fraud cases. Now, while these reasons can be attributed to the occurrence of NPAs, there are certain recent phenomena which are leading to mounting of NPAs even now. So let us try to understand what are these. Now, the reasons for mounting NPAs in the current times includes risk aversion by bankers in the context of giving loans. Secondly, there is delay in formulation of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, because of which ownership of the project can be changed for its revival. And lastly, poor governance of public sector banks can also be counted as a reason for mounting NPAs in the current times. Now with this, we have analyzed all types of reasons which lead to NPAs. Now let us move on to the suggestions given by Mr. Raghuram Rajan to help remedy the situation. Now in his note, Mr. Raghuram Rajan highlighted the points upon which RBI could have done better. These include Now in his note, Mr. Raghuram Rajan has explained the situations under which RBI could have performed better. Now, as we have already discussed that in between the years of 2006 to 2008, there was rapid economic growth, due to which loans were generated on a large number. However, the economic crash of 2008, after the financial crisis of 2008, RBI decided to go with forbearance, which means, after the financial crisis of 2008, RBI decided to go with forbearance, which means putting restraint on any action, because it was believed that growth would soon revive and projects would come back on track. However, this proved to be false. Apart from this, RBI should have been more decisive in enforcing penalties on non-compliant banks, which it did not do earlier. Also, RBI should have pushed for a more rapid enactment of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in order to efficiently deal with the NPAs. So these were some suggestions given by Mr. Raghuram Rajan in the context of NPAs and RBI's role in it. Now moving on, Mr. Rajan has also put forward some suggestions in order to prevent the problem of NPAs in future. So let's discuss them. His first suggestion includes setting up a high-level empowered and responsible group by the government on cleaning up the banks. Secondly, he pointed out that the governance of public sector banks should be improved by working on the recommendations of the PJ Nayak committee. Thirdly, he emphasized on the process of efficient project evaluation and monitoring in advance to lower the risk of NPAs. Apart from this, in the context of conflict resolution, he pointed out that both out of the course restructuring process and the bankruptcy process need to be strengthened and made speedy for effective dealing of NPAs. Lastly, he suggested that government should focus on the sources of the next crisis and not just the last one. So these are very important recommendations given by Mr. Raghuram Rajan, and they can be directly used in any answer from mains perspective. Now we just discussed the last point, which said that government should focus on sources of the next crisis and not just the last one. In this context, what should be our focus? Let's discuss that. Now we know that every bank has some certain credit targets, and in order to achieve them, sometimes they abandon appropriate diligence, which later creates the environment for future NPAs. So this should be avoided at every cost. An example of such credit targets can be Mudra loans as well as the Kisan credit cards, wherein 6.37 lakh crores has been dispersed under the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana. Moving on to the next point, the credit guarantee scheme for MSME run by SIDBI is also growing contingent liability and needs to be examined with urgency. So we can see how these government schemes, although providing credit, may lead to NPAs. Apart from this, the government must refrain from announcement of loan waivers, because they create an adverse impact on the credit culture in India and puts unduly strains on the government finances. So with this, the discussion on this news stands completed, and finally we need to remember 4 important things. Firstly, the reasons behind creation of NPAs. Secondly, we must remember the current factors leading to NPAs. Thirdly, it is very important to remember Mr. Rajan's comments on the role of RBI in the context of NPAs. And lastly, we must remember the suggestions put up by Mr. Rajan, which will help remedy the situation in the context of NPAs. Now, following this trajectory, please try and answer this question. This news appears on page 12 and it reads that US threatens sanctions on ICC prosecution of officials. Now, this news can be covered under GS paper 2 in the context of mains, and the domain will be international relations. Now let us first try and find out the key points mentioned in this news, and after that we'll try to jot down the areas which we need to cover from UPSC perspective. So let's begin. Now this news is very clearly indicating that there is a conflict going on between the International Criminal Court and the US. So let us understand what this conflict is all about. Now the ICC is trying to open an investigation into the alleged war crimes which were committed by the service members of US along with the intelligence professionals during the war in Afghanistan. Now the ICC prosecutor has requested to initiate an investigation into what is considered as American war crimes in Afghanistan. Now in response to this, US, which is not a member of ICC, has threatened a tough action against them if they try to prosecute Americans in the alleged war crimes which happened in the Afghanistan war. So with this, we have understood the reasons behind the conflict between the USA and International Criminal Court. However, this news is currently in transition and we will have to wait and see how it moves forward. Currently, from the perspective of mains, we have few things important for us with respect to this news. These include, number 1, what is ICC, and secondly, what is the jurisdiction of ICC. So let us try and answer these 2 questions in the next slides. Now let us try and understand the mandate of ICC. Now the International Criminal Court is a permanent international court, number 1, and it is established to investigate, prosecute and try individuals, not group of people, individuals who are accused of crimes like genocide, crime against humanity, war crimes and crimes of aggression. And it is in this context that ICC wants to investigate US with respect to the alleged war crimes in the Afghanistan war. Apart from this, the International Criminal Court was established by a treaty known as Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Now let us shift our focus towards the jurisdiction of ICC. Now any state who is a member of the Rome Statute, which we just discussed earlier, can be placed within the jurisdiction of ICC. Apart from this, the International Criminal Court has a right to exercise its jurisdiction wherein if the alleged perpetrator is a national of a member state or if the crime was committed in the territory of a member state. It is in these 2 situations that the ICC may exercise its jurisdiction. Also, the jurisdiction of ICC may be extended to a state which is not a party to the statutes. Moreover, the United Nations Security Council can also refer a situation to ICC. Moving on to the next jurisdictions, it should be noted that anyone can send a complaint to the ICC as there is no eligibility clause. Now moving on to the other jurisdictions, an important point to note is that anyone can send a complaint to the ICC as there is no eligibility clause, which means that it is open to individuals, groups and states. However, if we need to make a referral, then it can only be made either by a state who is party to the Rome Statute, or it can be made by the UNSC. Now this point is important in understanding the situation between US and Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is a state party to ICC and therefore the court has jurisdiction over any war crimes committed in this territory, and it is thus that ICC wants to investigate the US in context to these war crimes. However, another key point to note is that Afghanistan did not ask for this investigation. The ICC prosecutor herself decided to open the investigation. So this point shows that the state, even if the state member do not ask for an investigation, the ICC prosecutor himself or herself have the authority to open an investigation. But there is a certain procedure which the authority needs to follow before opening an investigation. This includes that the Rome Statute requires the prosecutor to seek the authorization from the judges of the court, that is ICC, which is currently awaited in the context of Afghanistan, and thus we must wait for future developments. Now with this, we have completed the discussion on this news. The most important points to remember would be: number 1, the mandate of ICC. Secondly, we must know something about the Rome Statute. Thirdly, we must know about the various situations under which the ICC's jurisdictions operate. And lastly, we must know how to correlate this information with the current happenings between the US and the ICC, as these may come as statement-based questions in the context of prelims or can form a part under a descriptive answer in mains. This news appears on page 9 and it reads, "Encouraging Young Minds." Now this news is important from mains perspective, as the author in this article is highlighting India's education system, and the main point of emphasis in this article is exploring scientific ideals for students. It is in this context that this article will be covered under GS paper 2 under the subheading of social justice. Now moving on, a question in 2015 mains was asked under GS paper 2, which was talking about higher education in India, and it required for the students to write about the major improvements that were needed in this context. So from this question, we can make out that education system is an important part of UPSC's syllabus, hence this article is relevant. So let's move forward and understand it. Now, as we have already discussed, the main highlight of this article is the India's education system, which does not allow any exploration in the context of scientific ideals. Now, the author has tried to form her opinion by giving an example of Akshay Venkatesh, who had received Fields Medal Award in the field of mathematics. It is in this context that she highlighted that due to lack of opportunity and training infrastructure, our education system is not able to produce any Fields Medal. So from these points, we can understand that the core idea of this article is to delve into the problems faced by the students under the Indian education system. Also, the author has given reference to Fields Medal along with a program in India named as Mathematics Training and Talent Search, and thus it will be these three areas which we will be discussing in this article. So let's begin. Now this article is trying to tell us that although there are programs in India which are devoted to training students of mathematics, for example, Mathematics Training and Talent Search Program, however, these programs cover very small number of students which does not create a very big impact. The author also focuses that prizes and awards are not a solution to our problems in the field of education. Rather, what we need is a healthy educational ecosystem wherein student can develop his or her innovation instincts. Apart from this healthy educational system which is desired will provide enough opportunity for the young mind to grow, nurture and experiment, which is currently lacking in our education system. Also, a healthy educational ecosystem may give the students a relevant space to explore abstract mathematical and scientific ideas freely, which is opposed to our current existing system, as this may challenge the boundaries of existing knowledge. Now, moving on to the next aspect, let us also understand something about the Fields Medal Award, which is mentioned in this article with respect to an Indian who just recently won it in the field of mathematics. Now, this award is given out every 4 years on the occasion of International Congress of Mathematicians, which recognizes outstanding mathematical achievements and a promise of future achievement. Now, these awards are granted to between 2 to 4 mathematicians, and it is also referred as the Mathematicians Nobel Prize. So, with this we can understand the importance of Fields Medal Award in mathematics. Lastly, by tradition, this award is only given to those mathematicians who are under the age of 40 rather than to senior scholars. Now, the last thing to remember in this news is regarding the Mathematics Training and Talent Search Program, or MTTS, which is evolved in India to conduct workshops from duration of 1 to 4 weeks throughout a year in different locations. It also conducts teacher training programs titled Pedagogical Trainings for Mathematics Teachers, short form for PTMT, and other academic discussions which benefit a large class of mathematicians in India. However, while giving the reference of this program, the main aim of the author was to suggest that these programs cover very small number of children and hence the impact is not that great. So finally, with respect to mains, we need to remember few key points in this answer, which includes some current programs running in India with respect to scientific education. Secondly, we need to remember the drawbacks of these programs. And lastly, we need to remember some suggestions that were given by the author which may help create a conducive environment for the students so that the boundaries of existing knowledge can be challenged. This completes the discussion on this news. With this, we come to an end to the discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on for the question of the day.